You're just too sensitive. You're dramatizing. When you're told this, they are not describing your reality. They are protecting their own fragile ego because they'd rather destroy you than admit they were wrong.
Okay, I want you to picture this moment. You're looking at someone you care about, maybe really deeply, and you suddenly get this this really unnerving feeling, this realization. You are living in two completely separate realities. In your reality, something huge just happened, something painful. Maybe a boundary was just completely shattered, like a serious fight, maybe a betrayal, or just a moment of, I don't know, devastating cruelty. You're reeling from it, maybe even feeling traumatized.
They're just shaken.
Totally. But then you look over at them, and in their reality, everything's fine. They're like making coffee, scrolling on their phone, acting like the whole thing was, well, as one person we looked at described it, just a regular Tuesday.
Wow. Yeah, that gap, that profound, almost stomach-dropping confusion that makes you feel like, am I losing my mind here? That's exactly what we're diving into today. Because when the person who caused you all that pain acts like your suffering just doesn't weigh anything, like it has no place in their world, the natural impulse is to try and force them to see it. But that usually just makes the confusion worse, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And that feeling, that sense, you're losing your sanity, it's not an accident. We found it's often the intended result of a really sophisticated psychological defense mechanism.
Exactly.
So our mission today is to cut right through that confusion. We want to give you a kind of shortcut to understanding this whole defensive architecture of denial. We're going to analyze why people do this and, maybe more importantly, how you can get your emotional center back when they just refuse to acknowledge the damage they've done.
Yeah, we're talking about digging into some really profound but also actionable insights from relationship psychology. We're going to try and uncover the real reason behind this incredibly hurtful behavior.
Because it's not just forgetfulness, is it?
No, definitely not. It's not simple amnesia or even just a lack of care, though it feels like that. It's actually about a conscious, almost calculated psychological choice. It's a form of extreme self-preservation, really. And it reveals this core truth about how they prioritize protecting their own fragile self-image over absolutely everything else, including you. Including the relationship itself.
Okay, so let's unpack that first big realization right away. Because this idea, it really reframed how I understood everything we reviewed. The person who caused the pain, the one acting like everything's normal, they are not experiencing true emotional amnesia. They haven't just, forgotten.
That is absolutely the cornerstone we need to establish first. You're spot on. They remember. They remember the words, they remember the gestures, and critically, they remember the impact it had on you.
They saw it happen.
They saw it. They registered that moment when maybe something just went out in your eyes, or when your voice cracked or you flinched. The difference isn't the memory itself, it's the psychological choice they've made about what to do with that memory.
So, okay, it's a choice to build. But like in an alternative reality. But how does the mind even do that? Isn't it incredibly tiring to actively sort of lie to yourself about something so significant, so emotionally charged?
It is exhausting, absolutely. But the mind, in these cases, performs this kind of psychological calculation. It weighs the cost, and the perceived cost of maintaining the lie, of upholding that alternate reality, feels less damaging to their internal system than the cost of facing the truth.
Wow.
So they've consciously, or sometimes subconsciously, but definitely actively, elected an internal reality where the impact of their actions just doesn't count, where your suffering essentially doesn't exist in their narrative. Why? Because they simply cannot afford the cognitive dissonance.
What do you mean, can't afford it?
I mean, letting the truth of your pain, the reality of the damage they caused, would force them to confront a deeper, much more threatening truth about themselves.
Meaning they have to see themselves as like the bad guy, or at least someone capable of inflicting real pain.
Precisely. Their entire psychological system considers that truth, the admission of their own destructive capability, far more threatening to their self-concept, to their carefully constructed image of themselves, than the actual real-world suffering they inflicted on you.
So they're basically choosing their internal comfort zone over objective, observable reality.
That's a great way to put it. It's a massive act of, well, you could call it emotional narcissism, or at least profound self-protection.
Which sounds like the core driver then.
Yeah.
Self-protection takes priority over protecting the relationship itself.
Without a doubt. When they act like nothing happened, forget safeguarding the connection, they are rigorously, relentlessly protecting their internal self-image from any evidence that suggests fault or flaw.
I mean, we all have parts of ourselves we're not proud of, right? Those dark corners, as the material called them.
Of course. That's just being human. We all have our shadow side, aspects we'd rather keep hidden. But there's a critical difference, a fundamental split between someone who acknowledges that darkness, even just to themselves, and maybe commits to working on it, someone who can say, yeah, I messed up, or I'm capable of hurting people, and someone who denies it completely.
And the denier.
The denier works tirelessly, often unconsciously, to create and maintain a parallel internal reality where that shameful behavior or that destructive part of them literally never existed. That denial is the defense mechanism. And the tragedy is it keeps them emotionally stuck, rigid, and ultimately very alone in their own emotional world, even if they're surrounded by people.
And okay, if they deny the behavior, then they also have to deny the guilt that comes with it. But that emotional weight, that guilt, it has to go somewhere, doesn't it?
Yep.
Which is where projection comes in.
Exactly right. Instead of integrating their shadow or accepting their flaws as part of being human, they push the entire emotional load, the shame, the responsibility, the guilt outward. They project it onto the injured person.
So you become the carrier.
You become, often without even realizing it at first, the unwilling container, the depositary for this massive psychological burden that actually belongs entirely to them. They've essentially outsourced their conscience.
Wow. So the implicit message they're sending, even if they don't say it, is terrifyingly simple. If you carry the pain, I don't have to carry the responsibility. You hold their unwanted feelings for them.
That is the function of the denial, precisely. And to keep this huge projection going, to sustain it, they construct what some of the sources called an identity of emergency.
An identity of emergency. What does that mean?
Think of it like a provisional self, a version of themselves that operates under the constant, pressing need to remain justified, untouchable, and always, always in the right, even when all the evidence, all the facts contradict that stance.
Can you give us a more concrete example? Like, how does that identity of emergency show up in just a regular interaction?
Okay, sure. It often manifests as extreme rigidity and hyperdefensiveness. Because this identity is so fragile, right, it's built on denial, so it can't tolerate even minor critiques or, say, playful teasing.
Yeah.
So if you jokingly point out a small mistake they made at work, or maybe how they loaded the dishwasher wrong instead of laughing it off, they might escalate instantly. They might turn the criticism back on you aggressively or just completely shut down, give you the silent treatment.
Because any criticism feels like an attack on that fragile self.
Exactly. This provisional self genuinely believes its own justifications that they are actually the victim in the situation, or that you grossly overreacted. This belief allows the individual to stay emotionally frozen. They might maintain relationships, but they tend to be superficial because real intimacy requires vulnerability.
Which they can't risk.
They can't afford it. Vulnerability might expose the very flaw, the very wrongness they're working so hard to deny. So they stay stuck, emotionally speaking, right where they were when they first built that defense, because their entire identity hinges on never being wrong. Real growth becomes impossible under those conditions.
Okay, so let's dig into the actual tactics they use to enforce this parallel reality they've built. Starting with silence. This one is so common. When the person who hurt you just goes completely silent, our first instinct, usually coming from empathy, is to think, okay, maybe they're processing, or they need time, or maybe they're trying to find the words for an apology.
Right. We interpret it through our own healthier lens. And that common empathetic assumption is exactly what makes the silence such a devastatingly effective tool for manipulation. The source material is really clear on this.
It's not passive.
Rarely. The silence after causing significant damage is seldom just reflective processing. It's usually a deliberate and frankly terrible tool designed specifically to exert control and manage your reaction.
Okay, how does silence work as a weapon? It feels so passive, but you're saying it's actually very active.
It's active because it traps you in a state of waiting, of anticipation. While you're waiting for an explanation, waiting for an apology, waiting for any sign that they even acknowledge what happened, your nervous system gets locked into this constant high-stress state of alert. It's often called vigilance.
You're on edge.
Constantly, you're pouring vital energy into this waiting game, often without even realizing how much it's draining you. You become emotionally tethered to their response or lack thereof, and that sustained vigilance, that waiting, it's utterly debilitating. It's often designed, consciously or not, to exhaust you until you just drop the issue entirely just to get some peace back.
Wow. And that sustained stress, that exhaustion, that's what cracks the door open for really profound self-doubt, isn't it?
Yeah.
The silence creates this perfect vacuum.
Absolutely. A vacuum for a manipulative inner voice to surface. The silence creates the ideal conditions for that little whisper that says, did I really exaggerate? Am I just too sensitive? Maybe it wasn't actually that bad. Maybe I provoked them somehow.
Oof, that voice.
And here's the crucial insight you have to grab onto. You must learn to recognize that that voice is not yours. It's not your authentic self speaking. It is the direct result, the echo of emotional manipulation specifically designed to destabilize your internal compass and make you question your own valid experience. The more energy you waste searching for answers in their silence, the more disconnected you become from your own inner truth, your own reality.
And this desperate search for validation outside of ourselves, it leads right into this really powerful metaphor that came up in the sources.
Yeah.
The dynamic of the errant planet.
Yes, that metaphor really captures the devastating relational cost perfectly. What happens is the injured party's vital energy, your focus, your thoughts, your emotions, starts to orbit the person who caused the damage. You begin treating them as the sun, the center of your emotional universe.
Instead of yourself.
Exactly. Instead of rotating around your own emotional axis, your own needs, your goals, your friendships, your well-being, you start revolving entirely around their center of gravity. You find yourself constantly monitoring their mood, analyzing their every word or silence, desperately seeking some sign of validation, some flicker of recognition that the event you experienced actually happened in their reality too.
What are some, real-world signs that someone might be caught in that errant planet dynamic? How would you know?
Oh, the symptoms are pretty clear once you know what to look for. Things like intense emotional dependence, obviously, compulsively checking their phone, their social media, maybe even their location, constantly changing your own plans based on their potential availability or their perceived mood.
Yeah, I can see that.
And crucially, neglecting your own internal world. Your hobbies, your friends, your self-care, your own fulfillment. You essentially forget your own needs. You lose touch with your own center. And your entire sense of well-being becomes dependent on the other person's willingness or unwillingness to acknowledge you and your pain. It's a profound form of emotional hijacking, and it can keep someone trapped for years if they don't consciously realize, wait, I've stopped spinning on my own axis.
Okay, so let's say this silence finally breaks. The injured person summons the courage to confront them, maybe hoping to just restore reality, hoping for some acknowledgement. But what usually happens next is deflection.
Right? Almost inevitably, yes. When that confrontation finally occurs, the typical response is engineered to invalidate your experience. You hear phrases like, you're just too sensitive, or you're always dramatizing things, or why are you still bringing that up? It wasn't a big deal.
Yes, those phrases.
This is classic deflection. It's a subtle technique, but psychologically devastating because it doesn't just disagree with your version of events, it actively invalidates your entire perception of reality. It pushes you into a corner where to even stay in the conversation, you feel forced to start doubting your own mind, your own feelings.
But I have to ask again, why? Why is it seemingly impossible for them to just say, you know what? I messed up. I'm sorry. Surely that takes less energy than this whole intricate dance of denial and deflection.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But for them, admitting a mistake isn't just about recognizing a single error in judgment. We have to go back to that incredibly fragile psychological architecture we talked about.
Okay.
In their internal self-concept, committing an error, especially one that caused significant pain, automatically equates to a total collapse of their entire self-image. It doesn't just mean I made a mistake. It means I am a mistake. I am a total failure as a human being.
Wow, that's extreme.
It is. Their need to maintain that perfect, unblemished internal image is so absolute, so brittle, that they genuinely prefer to destroy the relationship, inflict deep and unnecessary further pain, rather than face even the minimal discomfort of simply saying, I made a mistake and I hurt you. The fear of internal collapse, of seeing themselves as flawed, completely outweighs the fear of external destruction or losing the relationship. And that, right there, is the definition of profound emotional immaturity. And this whole cycle, the self-protection, the deflection, the denial, it points directly toward this deep-seated emotional immaturity. And one way this manifests, which can be incredibly confusing, is through something called functional dissociation.
Functional dissociation. Okay, that sounds like a heavy clinical term.
Yeah.
Can we break that down? What does that actually look like in practice? Because you see this, right? These individuals can be incredibly affectionate 1 minute, so loving, charming, really attentive. And then, sometimes just moments later, deeply cruel or completely dismissive.
Yeah.
And it's like their conscious mind doesn't even connect the two behaviors.
That's exactly it. That ability to pivot so sharply, so completely between those two extremes, without any apparent internal conflict or remorse, without needing any kind of reset button in between that is functional dissociation in action. They essentially live in separate emotional compartments.
Compartments.
Yeah, think of it like the self who hurts and the self who loves never actually meet in the same psychological room. They're kept strictly separate. When they're operating from the loving self, the memory and feeling of the cruelty they inflicted literally doesn't exist in their conscious awareness at that moment, and vice versa. They do this, unconsciously usually, to maintain their positive self-image.
So the conscious mind isn't just unaware, it's actively segregated.
Segregated is a good word. It's a psychological survival mechanism, really. It's a way for them to function day to day while, unfortunately, leaving this trail of emotional destruction behind them. They don't have to reconcile their positive self-image with their negative actions because those two things are never allowed to be simultaneously present in their psychological field.
Which means?
Which means they can genuinely feel completely remorse-free in the moment they deny hurting you, because the part of them that did the hurting is effectively stored away, compartmentalized, inaccessible to their current operating self.
That's mind-bending. And this avoidance of responsibility, it brings us back to something crucial. You mentioned the role of guilt. Society often paints guilt as this awful, toxic feeling you need to get rid of at all costs. But the sources we looked at suggest that genuine guilt actually has well, they called it a sacred function.
It really does. And it's vital we distinguish between toxic shame, that feeling that tells you I am bad, which is paralyzing, and genuine guilt, which says I did something bad. That genuine guilt, that pang of conscience, it's actually a necessary internal compass for human development, for moral growth.
A compass.
Yeah. It's the feeling that points directly to where we need to grow, where we've caused harm and need to make repairs, and where we need to offer a truly authentic apology, one that comes from the heart, from real remorse, not just from calculation or wanting to smooth things over. It's the engine of relational repair and personal evolution.
So what happens when someone systematically refuses to listen to that compass? When they consistently choose denial over feeling that guilt and learning from it?
Well, when someone systematically refuses to feel genuine guilt, when they avoid that discomfort at all costs through constant deflection, projection, denial, they essentially become emotionally frozen. Their maturity, their emotional development often grinds to a halt right around the point where they started heavily relying on these defenses.
They stop growing up emotionally.
Pretty much. They can't evolve because they literally cannot see the real, tangible impact of their actions on others. They remain blind to it. So they continue projecting their internal mess onto others, perpetuating these painful cycles. And tragically, this pattern can get transmitted across generations as their children or partners learn implicitly that denial is the normal or acceptable way to handle conflict. They become emotionally blind to the consequences of their own acts simply because they're unwilling or perhaps unable to tolerate the internal discomfort required for genuine self-reflection and change.
That is just a staggering cost of emotional immaturity.
Yeah.
And for you listening right now, this brings us to maybe the biggest and most painful trap in all of this, internalizing the guilt that does not belong to you.
This is absolutely the crucial pivot point for starting to heal. If you are listening to this and any of this resonates, you have to internalize this message. Your job is not to sustain the emotional wounds that the other person refuses to look at or heal within themselves.
That's hard, though.
It is incredibly hard. But you are not responsible for being their therapist. You are not responsible for being the excuse maker for the person who harmed you. And you are certainly not responsible for finding justifications for behavior that is, frankly, inexcusable.
But we often fall into that role, don't we? We become the fixer or the understanding one or the excuse finder. We often do it to try and keep the peace or maintain a relationship, or maybe just to regain some sense of control in a really chaotic situation.
I understand why it happens, but that effort, however well-intentioned, is fundamentally misplaced. Your true essential work isn't managing their internal state. It's your own internal growth and healing. It's about letting go of that desperate need for them to finally validate your pain and instead investing that precious energy completely into your own recovery, your own integration, your own sense of wholeness.
So when you stop taking on their responsibility,
You take back the power over your own life, your own narrative, and crucially, your own future.
okay, so we've identified this trap of unearned guilt. How do we then move from recognizing that to actually achieving real closure? Because, we're often taught that closure is this external thing, that perfect dramatic movie moment where they finally see the light break down and give you the apology you deserve. But the source material suggests a much harder, maybe more empowering internal truth about closure.
Yeah, that Hollywood ending. It's largely a myth when dealing with these dynamics. The difficult, maybe bracing truth is that external closure, the kind that depends on them, is often unattainable. Not all wounds will come with apologies attached. Not all questions you have will get satisfying answers. And certainly not all endings will be neatly tied up with a bow of mutual understanding.
So waiting for them is pointless.
If you wait for their external validation, if you keep waiting for them to finally confirm your reality, you remain trapped. You stay locked in that errant planet dynamic, potentially indefinitely. Their inaction, their denial, literally becomes the bars of your prison.
Therefore, the most powerful kind of closure, maybe the only reliable kind, is the one you consciously decide to give yourself.
Absolutely. That's the core message. Closure is the moment you make the internal decision, the firm resolution, not to carry what isn't yours anymore. You stop waiting for the external structure of their apology, and instead, you build your own internal structure of peace, of acceptance of reality as it is. That act, right there, is the recovery of your emotional center. It's the definition of emotional sovereignty.
Okay. And once we stop orbiting them, once we reclaim that center, what changes practically? What's the real benefit?
Oh, the benefits are immense. The primary one is clarity, just profound clarity. From that place of recovered center, you suddenly gain this ability to clearly discern red flags before they escalate into full-blown emotional storms.
You see things earlier.
Much earlier. And because you're operating from a place of internal stability, you can choose partners, friends, romantic partners, even work colleagues who actually possess the capacity for accountability, for taking responsibility, because you're no longer making choices driven by desperation or fear of being alone or a subconscious need to fix someone. You're choosing from a place of fullness, not lack.
And that clarity also allows us, maybe forces us, to redefine what love or even just healthy connection should actually feel like. We often get confused, mistaking intense drama, that emotional roller coaster, the constant making up and breaking up for true passion or deep connection.
That is such a critical correction we need to make, both individually and culturally. We absolutely must discard the myth that mature, healthy love is defined by constant drama or high intensity. It's not. Mature love, sustainable connection is built on far quieter foundations. Stability, presence, consistency. It's built on the fundamental ability of both people to be present with themselves and with each other, especially when things get difficult or conflicts arise.
It's about building peace, not chaos.
Exactly. It's about building a shared space of mutual peace and growth, not constantly navigating exhilarating but exhausting chaos. And this clarity also forces us to confront the problem of deficiency or lack.
What do you mean?
You simply cannot love effectively or relate healthily from a place of feeling wounded or incomplete. If you're constantly looking to another person to fill a void inside you, a void that ultimately only self-love, self-acceptance, and internal security can truly address, then the relationship is inherently built on shaky ground. It becomes based on neediness, not genuine connection. Love, the healthy kind, has to be born from a place of fullness, from a deep, secure connection with yourself first. Only then does it have the potential to be truly transformative and sustainable, rather than just another way to avoid your own internal work.
And absolutely fundamental to building that fullness, that sense of self, is understanding that your personal value is intrinsic. It's non-negotiable.
Yes. Your value as a person is fixed. It is inherent. It does not depend on being chosen by someone else. It is not subject to their approval, and critically, it is not diminished by their denial of your reality or your pain.
Holding on to that is key.
It's everything. When you truly internalize that intrinsic value, you can finally start choosing partners and friends from a place of abundance, knowing deep down that you are already complete, rather than choosing from a place of lack, driven by a fear of being abandoned or rejected. This internal completeness is what gives you the strength to set firm, healthy boundaries without needing to write exhaustive essays justifying them. And it gives you the quiet power to walk away peacefully when a connection simply does not serve your well-being without needing drama or explanation.
And finally, this entire journey towards self-centered, towards self-respect, it seems to require making peace with something many people fear: solitude.
That is often the ultimate differentiator, isn't it? Between those who seem perpetually trapped in repeating toxic relationship cycles and those who manage to break free. The ones who break free learn to tolerate themselves, to actually enjoy their own company. They make peace with solitude.
Realizing being alone isn't the same as being empty.
Precisely. They discover that being alone doesn't have to mean being lonely or empty. They learn to replace the constant noise and chaos of unhealthy dynamics with the quiet peace of self-knowledge and self-companionship. And it's from that place of internal completeness, of being okay on your own, that you gain the crucial discernment needed to recognize what truly adds value to your life versus what only brings complications, stress, and drains your energy. A mature love, healthy connection, it feels like peace. It feels like mutual growth. It allows you to be completely authentically yourself without needing constant explanation or justification. Okay, so now that we've kind of mapped out the psychological architecture of denial and the path towards reclaiming your center, let's zoom in on some more advanced concepts for discernment. Starting with the actual nature of the relationship itself, when this denial pattern becomes entrenched, you might find yourself experiencing something we could call selective emotional vampirism.
Emotional vampirism, wow, that term definitely suggests a serious imbalance. How can listeners recognize if that dynamic might be playing out in their own lives?
Well, it happens when the person engaging in denial selectively maintains all the benefits of the connection with you, your energy, your care, your support, your listening ear, your patience, without ever assuming any of the corresponding emotional or psychological responsibilities.
So they take, but they don't give back when it counts.
Exactly. For instance, they will happily lean on you and receive comfort from you when they are distressed or need something. But when you are distressed, especially if it's because of their actions, they suddenly deny the problem exists, withdraw all comfort and support, or even turn it back on you. They essentially take what they need from the connection, but when accountability or reciprocal care is required, especially around difficult truths, they shut down the flow completely. It becomes a one-way energy street. A form of relational consumption, you could say.
That sounds exhausting. And the sources we looked at pointed out something really interesting about maturity and pattern recognition here. This concept of the fatigue of rescue.
Yes, that really resonated. It's particularly noticeable in individuals, and the sources highlighted women often between the ages of, say, 30 and 60, who have simply lived long enough and perhaps experienced enough unhealthy dynamics to start recognizing repeated patterns. This fatigue of rescue is actually a crucial sign, a gift of maturity, really.
A gift. How so?
It's your internal system finally signaling, loud and clear, that it is time to stop carrying the emotional labor for another capable adult, especially an adult who vehemently denies that a problem even exists or that they need to change or repair anything. You reach a point where you realize the sheer amount of energy required to constantly try and rescue them or get them to see reality is literally draining your own life force, preventing your own growth.
But when you start to pull back, when you stop being the rescuer or the endless understander, that internal discomfort, that guilt of awakening you mentioned, can hit really hard.
Oh, it absolutely does. And it's important to normalize that. It's a predictable, though temporary, wave of discomfort that arises when you start to violate years, maybe decades, of social conditioning. Conditioning that told you that to be a good partner or a good daughter or just a good person, you had to be infinitely patient, endlessly understanding, and always forgiving, no matter what.
So the guilt feels like you're being bad or selfish.
Exactly. That feeling is painful because it directly challenges your long-held identity as the nurturing, supportive, good one. But you have to understand, true goodness and genuine compassion must include self-dignity and self-compassion. You are not ultimately responsible for managing the emotions and choices of other adults. You are responsible for creating emotional safety and integrity for yourself.
This brings us back full circle to the mechanism of denial itself, which has this very specific, maybe the most insidious manifestation, something we termed the perpetrator's selective amnesia.
Ah, yes. This one is incredibly damaging because it directly attacks your perception of shared history, your reality. It is a highly sophisticated, strategic defense mechanism. It is not a genuine memory lapse or problem.
How does it work?
The perpetrator can somehow vividly recall, in minute detail, minor errors or perceived slights you committed months, maybe even years ago. Perhaps you were 5 minutes late for dinner once, or you missed one specific detail in a long conversation. They hold on to those memories with perfect clarity, often bringing them up repeatedly.
Okay.
But they will conveniently and completely forget or claim to forget significant pain or cruelty they inflicted just days or weeks ago, like maybe yelling at you until you cried, or giving you the silent treatment for days after a disagreement, or breaking a major promise. Those major events suddenly erased from their memory banks.
So they use your tiny past mistakes to completely negate or distract from their major present cruelty.
Precisely. It's the ultimate form of reality editing. And again, this is not a memory problem like dementia. It is a profound problem of emotional integrity. They're fundamentally incapable, it seems, of holding a complete integrated self-image that includes both their good loving aspects and their bad destructive aspects. They must actively erase the memories of their harmful behavior to maintain their internal narrative of being the good one, the justified one, the stable one. They live in a constantly self-edited reality.
And the painful takeaway there is?
The painful implication is stark. You cannot have a truly real, genuinely intimate, trusting relationship with someone who cannot see their own totality, who is constantly editing their internal truth to avoid accountability. It's like trying to build a house on shifting sand.
Which leads us, finally, to the exit strategy, or maybe the repair strategy, if possible, which often hinges on the really thorny issue of forgiveness. There's just immense societal pressure, isn't there, especially perhaps on people in more traditional caregiving roles, for quick, almost immediate premature forgiveness, like it's a sign of spiritual superiority or something.
Yes, we absolutely need to dismantle that myth of instant, easy forgiveness. The source material was very strong on this point. Genuine forgiveness is a complex, often long internal process, and crucially, it cannot exist meaningfully without the prior, explicit external recognition of the damage caused.
So you can't forgive something that hasn't even been acknowledged.
Oh, exactly. Premature forgiveness offering peace before any accountability has been taken, before the harm has even been named by the person who caused it, doesn't actually heal anything. It just causes the pain, the injustice, the violation to be buried deeper within you. It gets pushed down where it continues to fester silently, often causing long-term harm to your self-worth and your ability to trust. It essentially bypasses the necessary emotional work of processing the injury.
Okay, so let's say, hypothetically, we're waiting for an authentic apology. Maybe we've decided the relationship is worth giving that chance for repair. What does a real apology actually look like? What are the non-negotiables, the 4 standards we should be holding?
An authentic apology, one that actually creates the potential for healing and rebuilding trust, has to include 4 essential non-negotiable elements. First, specific recognition of the damage caused. They need to name exactly what they did wrong without vagueness or minimizing. I recognize that when I yelled at you and called you names, that was deeply hurtful and unacceptable. Not just, I'm sorry for what happened.
Okay, specific recognition. What's second?
Second, complete assumption of responsibility. This means 0 justifications, 0 excuses, 0 shifting of blame onto you or circumstances. It's, I take full responsibility for my actions, not, I'm sorry, but you were pushing my button.
No buts. Got it.
Third, a genuine felt expression of remorse. You should be able to sense, or they should explicitly state, that they feel genuinely sorry for the pain they caused you. It's about empathy for your experience, not just regret about getting caught or facing consequences.
And the 4th element?
Fourth, and this is crucial for rebuilding trust, a concrete commitment to change the damaging behavior moving forward. What steps will they take to ensure this doesn't happen again? It shows they understand the gravity and are invested in preventing recurrence. This combination is the only solid basis for true repair.
That's a very high standard. And it highlights why it's so important to recognize the non-apologies that completely fail to meet it. What are some common ones listeners should watch out for?
Oh, they are insidious because they sound like apologies sometimes. Listen closely for these manipulations. The absolute classic is, I'm sorry you felt hurt. See the shift. It subtly puts the focus and the blame on your subjective emotional reaction, not their objective action.
Right. It implies maybe you shouldn't have felt hurt.
Precisely. Another big one. I'm sorry, but you also. Anything following the but is usually a justification or blame shift that instantly invalidates the entire apology. And then there's the conditional, I'm sorry if I offended you. The if questions the very validity of your experience. Maybe you weren't really offended, maybe you're just being difficult. Authentic apologies are actually quite rare, sadly, precisely because they require a level of vulnerability, humility, and self-awareness that many people deeply entrenched in denial are simply unwilling or unable to access. Hashtag outro.
Wow. Okay, this has been a really profound deep dive, hasn't it? We've journeyed through the whole architecture of emotional denial, from understanding that conscious choice behind creating a parallel reality, to recognizing the destructive dynamic of the errant planet, unpacking the painful trap of unearned guilt, and finally, drawing that crucial distinction between premature, silencing forgiveness, and authentic, healing forgiveness. It's definitely heavy material, but so essential, I think, for anyone trying to take back control of their emotional life.
Absolutely. And if there's one core message to take away, it's this. Your capacity to love, your precious time, and your vital life energy are finite and valuable resources. They truly deserve to be invested in people who demonstrate the capacity, the willingness to honor the impact of their actions on you.
That's key.
Remember this, the right person for you, whether a friend or partner, isn't necessarily the one who never makes mistakes, because we all do. The right person is the one who possesses the humility to recognize their mistakes when they happen, the courage to apologize authentically when they cause harm, and crucially, the self-discipline to actually work on changing damaging behavior. You are complete as you are, your pain is real, and your fundamental right to conscious, responsible, respectful relationships is absolutely non-negotiable.
And always remember, conscious, peaceful solitude is infinitely preferable to toxic company. When you finally truly connect with yourself, when you commit to healing your own wounds, you start to realize deep down that you don't actually need anyone else's validation or recognition for your pain or your reality to be real. So here's our final provocative thought for you to carry forward from this deep dive. What fundamental relationship, the one you have with yourself, are you ready to consciously deepen, nurture, and prioritize starting today, regardless of any external validation or lack thereof?
That's a powerful question to sit with. And if this deep dive resonated with you today, if it offered some valuable insights into relationship psychology that you can use, we'd really appreciate it if you'd like this video and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. And please leave a comment below.
Yeah, we genuinely love hearing from you. Let us know your thoughts, your experiences if you feel comfortable sharing, or you can also let us know in the comments what specific psychological topics or relationship dynamics you'd like us to focus on for future deep dives. We really appreciate your support and your willingness to dive deep into these important conversations with us.